Hello everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Corinne Barker, SSATB's Senior Director of Professional Development, and I will be moderating today's session. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us and thank our special presenters today, Andy Hogue, Kelly Dunn, and Robert Mitchell, for presenting today's webinar, The Dollars and Cents of Recruiting and Retaining High-Need Students. Because we have so many participants today, all attendees will be muted throughout the webinar. Please use the text box on your GoToWebinar control panel to ask any questions. Near the end of the webinar, the presenters will answer questions and I will read them to them. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available online at admission.org's webinar page. And now I'd like to welcome Andy, who will be starting the webinar. Please be patient as Andy can have control of the screen. All right, Andy, go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much, Corinne. I really appreciate the opportunity here. My name is Andy Hogue. I'm the Director of Admissions and Placement at the New Jersey Seeds Program in Newark, New Jersey. And I'm joined with two wonderful colleagues of mine, Kelly Dunn and Robert Mitchell, and they'll introduce themselves a little bit in a little bit. We just wanted to spend some time today addressing the importance of socioeconomic diversity at the independent school level. We've seen a lot of this in the news, even as early as this morning with the New York Times on the Michael Bloomberg approach to getting high-need kids, very bright high-need kids, into the college pipeline. We see this multiple times a week in these headlines with just the preponderance of students who are of high need, who are not making it into college or retaining through college, and we wanted to talk about the importance of it at the independent school level and how we as an independent school community can really have an impact on this. So Kelly and Rob, do you want to just say a quick hi, and then we'll get going into how we want to get through the goals of the day?
Sure.
Webinar?
My name is Rob. I'm sorry. Yeah, my name is Rob Mitchell. I'm the Director of Admission at Morristown Barrett School. I've been in admission for 10 years. Recently, I started in admission at Morristown Barrett 10 years ago, and I took over the office as Director 2 years ago. And so it's my pleasure to share with all of you, and I look forward to feedback.
Hi everyone, I'm Kelly Dunn. I am the Director of Special Projects at the Tatnall School. I actually just started down here in Wilmington, Delaware. I was at the Princeton Day School for 16 years and did some consulting work at a school up in Maine called North Yarmouth Academy. And this is a topic that Rob and Andy and I have shared. I've talked about lots over the years at SSATB conferences and at other times when we've expressed our interest in sort of moving the ball forward in terms of supporting and recruiting high-need students. So I'm excited to be here with you today.
Great. So we're just going to go right into the goals of the day here. And I just want to say real quick that we're very specific here about socioeconomic diversity as being the topic of conversation here, which obviously will involve racial diversity, as we've seen again in the university world, that if schools are putting an effort towards socioeconomic diversity, racial diversity, for better or for worse, is going to follow. At Seeds, we define diversity socioeconomically. Families have to meet a certain income cap to apply to our program, and 85% of our students are Black and Latino students. So, just wanted to go through a quick goals of the day and why it's an important topic. But really, what we want to get into is the recruitment and retention of students. So some of the obstacles and strategies towards recruiting at the independent school level, some of the obstacles and strategies towards yielding and retaining high-need families at the independent school level. And in both cases, how can a community-based organization like Seeds or many others across the country help independent school admissions offices and once the students are on campus, help the school community itself make sure that these students succeed while on campus. And then we're going to go into a quick conversation with the strength of the admission director voice at the decision-making level? How can the admission directors, who often have the burden of keeping this conversation going at the school, how can they have a stronger voice where decisions are really being made at the head of school level and even above at the board of director level? And again, how can a community-based organization help in that conversation? And then we have some resources at the end that we can share with you. As Corinne and Rob said, we are going to be going back and forth as we go through the slides here between the three of us. So please post any questions you have to Corinne, and any feedback you have. There are some opportunities at the slides here to give some thoughts from yourself, but we will wait until the end to have some conversation about that. So thank you.
And if I could add, if people have things to add to our list, if you send them to Corinne, we'll make sure they get onto the PowerPoint before we send it to her to be posted on the website.
Great.
Excellent.
Okay. Rob?
So why is socioeconomic diversity important? I think it's safe to say that the commitment to socioeconomic diversity is consistent at all of our schools, whether it's explicitly stated in our mission or implied. And these first three slides really illustrate the motivations and justifications for the need to pursue and enroll a wide range of students from the socioeconomic spectrum. The commitment to wanting to admit and enroll strong students regardless of need, that belief that the diverse student body makes instruction more productive, and that having different perspectives on our campuses makes that is the essence of what we're talking about, and why it is critical for us to have a very diverse campus. The challenges, we'll talk about strategies, and we'll also talk about ways in which admission directors, financial aid directors, diversity, and push the envelope institutionally in terms of administration. But we do need to understand the context from which, or the foundation by which we operate, and it is really mission driven. And we'll also talk about how to push that conversation later on in this presentation. But in terms of pressure, all of us experience that the external pressure regarding diversity, and it really comes from both sides in terms of external pressure to become more diverse, as well as that resistance to change, whether it's expanding outreach, the pressure to expand outreach and access, or that resistance. I think having a welcoming and supporting a diverse population is good for all of us. And we did a little research. We did a lot of research for this presentation, and one of the things that we thought was poignant and we wanted to bring up is the Pew report, and the fact that by 2015 it is estimated that the Caucasian population will be the minority. And so that's just something important to keep in mind when you're looking at the importance of focusing on and committing to socioeconomic diversity.
So this is Andy. You're going to hear us talk a lot about data and how data can tell a story. And we found a lot of information through the Pew Foundation, which has done a lot of work in this area. But I'm sure many of you are also aware of the work of Potsby and Avery in the work of high-need, very bright high-need students and really not making it to the college level. But what the value of a college degree can do in terms of lifelong earning. One of the greatest gaps being created right now are lifelong earning among students who have a college degree and students who do not have a college degree. And what the Pew Foundation talked about on this slide that you see here is what they call the stickiness at the ends, that if you're born in the bottom quintiles of socioeconomics, really the bottom 2 quintiles, you're going to stay there, and most likely are going to stay there. And similarly, if you're born into the top 2 quintiles, you're going to stay there. And really hard to get out. But one key, massive key to getting out of those bottom rungs of the ladder is through a college degree. And so it's really breaking a cycle of poverty that we need to impart upon the decision makers at our schools. Again, data is very pertinent. We need to keep data very pertinent, but data is also the storyteller in this, and I think it's something that people respond to and want to be a change maker of. I'm not going to go through this slide. Really, what this slide is talking about is some of the Avery and Hotsby information, but really, what we're hearing and seeing is that the most selective universities in the country are not doing what they need to do to enroll high-need students. And you can see here from the 1990s to 2012, really did not move the needle on enrolling high-need students. So the colleges are screaming for these kids to apply and come to their colleges. And I know that through the years that I've been working at SEEDS, one question that I get asked a lot when I'm advocating for a student from our program is, you know, this is all well and good now, but what are we going to be able to do with this student 4 years from now when they're looking for, you know, $60,000 at the college level in financial aid? And the story is that these colleges are absolutely looking for these kids. So investing in that student as a 9th grader is going to absolutely pay off 4 years later.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Well, now we want to move to sort of thinking about how we can recruit low-income families. And the first point of sort of the challenges that we have, and this is something that I think everybody on this call is well aware of. So I wanted to sort of broadly, in broad strokes, just talk about my experience and what I noticed back in 2008 when the economy crashed. And that is, at that time in 2007-8, when money seemed to be flowing, we were noticing in our school that we had the barbell effect, which you may have heard of, which is we had a lot of full pay families and a number of full need families, but the folks in the middle were getting squeezed. So the middle class, upper middle class, were not getting the smaller awards that they may have needed to enroll in our school. So ironically, we were trying to address that, but when the economy tanked in 2008, this actually forced us to move that barbell, move those things towards the middle. Because for the first time, we had some full-pay families who needed aid if they were going to continue at our school. They saw the loss in their investments in their businesses. And because I think we had 30 new families applying for the first time for aid who were already currently enrolled in the school, which suddenly meant that there were fewer dollars available to bring in new students, whether they needed a little bit of aid or a lot of aid. And that started the shift, unfortunately, to a, I don't want to call it a policy because nothing was ever written down, but definitely looking at giving out fewer full need grants and rather spreading out the funds to be able to enroll as many students as possible. And I think that this is just another example of the economic breakdown affecting those who are in need more than those who are at the top. And forcing those middle class awards or those sort of half awards, when the board saw the numbers and saw that we were awarding more, the school, if the tuition was $25,000, so up to 10 back then, if we were awarding $10,000, $9,000, $11,000 rather than the full boat, the board really liked that we were doing that. But it really was disappointing to those of us in admissions who had for so many years been out in the field recruiting students from low-income areas and being able to enroll them because we had the financial dollars to do that, and suddenly we were not able to. So Rob's going to talk about a few strategies, having technical difficulties, which only happens when you're on a webinar. Here are some. Sorry, you want to talk about these, Rob?
These are still the challenges, right? And so for us, you know, there are a number of challenges. Of course, the funding is always the biggest issue, but it's not the only issue. I mean, there are a number of ancillary issues that need to be addressed, and a lot of it has to do with culture and school culture, school climate, and providing prospective families with the ability to feel comfortable in your school environment and being able to position yourself to welcome students and families that may feel uncomfortable or uneasy. And so if you could go to the next slide, I do want to talk a little bit about the strategies.
Great.
And because it was so important for us in developing this presentation that we have practical rubber meets the road strategies that everybody could walk away from really, inspired to move forward, as opposed to just talking about the issues and stuff like that. And so in thinking about those concerns, one of the things that I feel really, really proud of is that I found a key to success in connecting with prospective families and in the process of recruiting. And that is my ability to learn from my current families about their issues, their concerns, the things that are working well in our community for them, the things that are not working so well for them, and being able to take that information and address it and be able to communicate what the things that work, and even discuss and talk about the things that don't work and how we're addressing them. That allows me to connect with prospective families who have the same issues, who have the same concerns, who want to know that their children will be cared for in the way that they deserve to be cared for, and want to know practical things about how that is happening. They want examples. They want evidence. Tell me what you're going to do when my child does X. And engaging with your current families in that regard, whether it's through surveys, bringing them in for coffees, or calling them on the phone and asking them about their experience, that information is so, so important. And then when you go out into the communities, when you're hosting events on campus, you have the ability to truly connect because you speak their language. I want to stress that is so important. And the flip side and the unintended consequence, the positive consequence from that, is that you also build relationships beyond the norm with your current families. And so as we know, our current families are our best marketing tool. So when we're talking about recruitment, engaging with current families, not only does it give you the information that you need to be able to communicate with new families, but you also build that bond and that relationship with the current families that may help you to attract new families. So it's a very, very important part of the process. So we can go to the next slide.
So another piece that we want to kind of keep coming back to in this conversation is what a CBO, a community-based organization, can do to partner with schools. CBOs like SEEDS, access organizations like SEEDS, would not exist without these partnerships. And so just as Rob was kind of talking about this relationship building on campus, it's also the relationship building off campus that is imperative to the recruitment process. And CBOs, like SEEDS, for 22 years have been building neighborhood relationships. So I kind of say here houses of worship and community centers and the best public schools. So even within the city of Newark, right, there are dozens and dozens of schools that are potential recruitment areas for private schools. But really there's probably 5 or 6 that are where the best and the brightest kids are. So working with CBOs who already have these relationships, and then the relationship with the family, helping families through, and I probably should have put this myth and misconception line ahead, but breaking down these myths of what an independent school is or a boarding school is, not the place that you're sending your troubled child, that kind of thing, and allowing CBOs to really get that out of the way before the conversation with the independent school happens. Knowing the independent school, knowing the families, and being able to find these mission-appropriate schools for our families is key. And I think one of the biggest benefits is this yield potential, which we're going to talk about yield in 1 second, but allowing CBOs to really help independent schools with yield on their financial aid dollars. So Kelly, we can shoot ahead.
Great, and I think my specific experience has been with New Jersey Seeds, but they really act as a search consultant. So it's interesting that sometimes we have these families with lots of money who hire a search consultant to help them find a school, and CBOs are helping those who don't have those opportunities, and so to partner with them has really been effective. So if the top of the funnel isn't very big and you aren't seeing lots of applicants from low-income areas, knowing that you can drill down on some of the recommended applicants from CBOs really can provide some relief there, I think. So again, I'm here at the challenges, which most of you, I think everybody already knows, but we started just talking about retention of high-need families, and all of us sort of thought, Rob and I both were saying, yeah, but very rarely does a student who's getting a close to full scholarship leave the school, and really where the bigger challenge is convincing them to apply and to come and to ultimately enroll. And so I think many of us have seen these situations in our school where the environment may not feel supportive and welcoming. It may just be the perception of the family, may actually be the culture of the school. The concern for families of whether we're going to be able to keep their family contributions to tuition the same over time. A lot of families, I think now, and certainly as we see the squeeze on our financial aid budgets, are we going to be able to maintain, if we're charging them $1,500, is that going to be the same for next year and the year after? Kindergarten through 12th grade, that's 13 years of that. Our school is going to be able to maintain that for families. And I have heard more and more families worrying about, are you going to drop us come 6th grade, things like that. Transportation is a big one, and Rob will talk a little bit more about that, particularly for us as day schools, although there certainly is a boarding component to getting back and forth to school. But transportation, if parents are working nights or working different shifts and can't pick the students up, often seen with New Jersey Seed students, they don't have a lot of extracurricular activities because there's no one to drive them after school. Right. Language barriers and cultural misunderstandings comes up quite a lot. I've known some parents who have been embarrassed to be on campus or to drive up in their car that may not look like everybody else's, and they don't have the education themselves to know what they should be looking for in their child's education, so they're hesitant to seek support. And the other part is sometimes faculty and staff, not even knowingly, don't provide the support that students may need, these students who can't afford beyond what they're doing now. And that's not a fault, it's an education piece on that, that has to come from the admission office and the leadership of the school, but also it can be uncomfortable, as we all know. So Rob has some strategies for... Yeah,
so I think it's critical when you're looking at both yield and retention. It's critical for us to make sure that either our current kids have allies and advocates, adults on campus that they can connect with, and for families, prospective families or prospective students to be able to show that this is the kind of culture that we have, a culture that is sensitive to the needs of our students, and there are adults on campus that our kids can connect with, that our kids can confide in, that our kids can turn to with issues and concerns, and that each individual student is not going to be overlooked or missed, because when we were talking about this slide in terms of strategies and issues, we did agree that for retention, if we have a full need family, we're not going to lose, and we're not going to stop funding our full need families at the rate that they're being funded. But if a student decides to leave, it's not because of the money; it's because of other issues, a disconnect, lack of feeling supported. And so we have to be on the front lines of making sure that our students have those avenues and those channels. Transportation is huge. The lives of our students in so many different ways. And our teachers, for the day schools, teachers are not even aware that, students have to travel an hour, somebody else, to get home, to get to school. So they're getting up at 5:30, they're getting home at 8:30, sometimes 9, from their school day. And so that is an issue that we definitely have to tackle. I know that a staunch advocate, and I've been shouting from the rooftops about our need to be more flexible with regard to pickup location and flexibility of the routes, just so that we can ease the pressure that our students face. Of course, sensitivity training absolutely be on the front lines again, making sure that our diversity coordinators in our schools are supported in really initiating and understanding for our teachers, so that our teachers can be enlightened on what our kids need. And then finally, we always need more money. That's just the bottom line.
If anyone's interested in more information about transportation in the last couple of schools and consulting things I've done, I've been looking at ways for schools to support transportation. Feel free to email me and I can share at least my experiences. I don't have the magic bullet because everything costs money, but I'd be happy to share that with you.
And then one quick point about named scholarships on this slide. I just wanted to just say that we have at Morristown-Berry, we have a fund that is specifically used for ancillary costs for families who are receiving financial aid. Is actually available to families who aren't on financial, who have demonstrated or expressed hardship. And it's a small fund that covers additional athletic gear, trips, a calculator for the geometry class, stuff that is not included in the tuition, that's over and above the books, but that will help students be a part of our community and not feel the burden to be left out. So, to push that, and it's an endowed fund that's managed by our development office. So I just wanted to add that.
I want to get past this slide because it has a picture of me on it. But I think that you can see from this list that money, we all need money. But one thing that I have seen more and more and has worked for us during Alumni Days is bringing back alums who receive financial aid, and it doesn't just necessarily have to be alums of color. But standing on the shoulders of giants. I think oftentimes every school year starts, and the students in an affinity group feel like they're starting over or doing something for the first time. And actually, there's many people who have gone before them who have gone through similar events, and sharing those experiences of our alums and our current students, I think, is would be a nice touch. And just very quickly, Joe Biden's grandchildren, go to Tatnall, and he himself was a full scholarship recipient at another school nearby here in Wilmington, and look where he is now. So I will give Andy credit for saying we should tell him all about Joe Biden. So now getting to the important part, and where Andy organizations like Andy's can be so helpful.
Yeah. So just want to keep track of time here, but the topic of money is a very emotionally charged topic for all of us, and again, with CBOs, being able to have a conversation, seeing the CBO as kind of this third-party partner of a school that doesn't have the political kind of the political burden of the school community, and the conversation with the head of school, or the conversation with the business office or the board. CBOs can really kind of act as a buffer in that conversation and be able to kind of have a fairly unemotional conversation about it while still telling the story that the data is telling. So for instance, one of the data points that Seeds is very proud of is this 96% number, that a ninth grader going off to a private school from New Jersey sees 96% of those ninth graders are making it to graduation. which is just such a powerful, powerful story to tell, and then going on to these colleges that, by and large, add value to the college list, and are the colleges that the heads of the board want to see on their college list at these schools. So being able to kind of tell this longitudinal story of what an investment in a ninth grader can mean, not just to that child's life, but to the school, to that child, to the future generations of that family. It really is a powerful, powerful story. And if you want to break it down into kind of the dollars and cents, it's a return on investment that most business people understand is a no-brainer in really helping these families out, helping these students out. So again, using CBOs to tell that story, it is that partnership with the school that is really important.
So our final piece, and this is one that if you follow SSATB, you know that they've been working hard to help admission directors have a stronger voice at the table for all things enrollment management. And what we're thinking about, how do we support as admission directors, how can we continue to bring the topic to the table as in our roles in our schools. And I'm going to let Andy talk about these challenges.
Yeah, so I found these. This was actually the National Association of Independent Schools every year puts out basically kind of a state of the state of the independent school community, and these were two graphs that I found, actually third, one on the other page too, but that I found really compelling in that the culture at the decision-making level of these schools, the culture in the community at the head of school and board chair level is really not ready to hear a lot of this conversation. This chart in particular, you're looking at 11 items from the top row all the way down to where the red circle is there. 11 items that are more important than creating a diverse and inclusive school community. In terms of that, you can see in 2006 it was a much higher number. Economy goes into recession, and what's one of the big pieces that gets hit is the diversity and inclusiveness of a school, primarily because of financial aid and dollars. So, there has to be this story being told, again, with data and the success of data and the return on investment with that story being told. But I am a true believer that heads of school and board chairs understand that story, and when told in the right way and with real numbers that have to do with their school community, we can really have this conversation, and CBOs can really be a leading force in having that conversation. Our salaries, again, do not depend upon these people. We can kind of go in with some more guns blaring, not necessarily, but we can go in with a louder voice on this one.
Rob is going to talk about a few strategies, and unfortunately we don't have the magic bullet. I wish we did, and I hope you didn't come to this webinar thinking we had it, but this is where I hope that you all will add your sort of strategies that may have worked for you and other things we can start collecting and continue the conversation after this webinar is over.
Right, I agree, and we are a work in progress, just like everybody else's, and so your feedback is critical for everyone. The sharing and the collaboration is what allows us to grow in this area. In terms of strategies for having a seat at the table or having a voice at the table, you just first of all have to acknowledge and accept that this is always going to be an uphill battle, and that our need for championing, I think I just made that word up, but our need to champion a socio-economically diverse school, really that's our charge. And so you have to see yourself as that champion. You have to see yourself as fighting upstream, and you have to be okay with that. That's the reality, and it's not going to be easy, but you have to do that. And the one thing that I do ask, I beg of all of us, is that we do the research to understand our community, and specifically in terms of racial and socioeconomic diversity. We need to know exactly what we're talking about in terms of the dollars that we put out, the return on investment that we put out, for two reasons. One, because when you're dealing at the head and board level, data is really the only language that they understand. Anecdotal language is good, but data speaks volumes in terms of, you know, what we need to do and how it needs to get done. And so you have to do in-depth research to understand your students, their performance, the money that you spend, all of that stuff, and be armed with the data to justify your position. And the other piece is that the research on your constituency educates you on what's going on. You may think that, you know, you are fighting one battle, but the research will show that you actually need to fight another battle. And so within, you know, under that umbrella. And so, you know, I do recommend, highly recommend, encourage, ask, beg that you begin to put together research strategies to look at the numbers, look at the data, cross-reference different data points to understand and get to know the trends so that you can communicate to your head. If you don't have access to the board, talk to your head. If you have access to the board, use that opportunity, let the data tell the story so that you can really get what you believe we deserve in you know, in our school community. So we can move on to the next slide.
The last line about taking the emotion out of the equation and out of the cause is a big one, and I'll speak from personally, because it's so the temptation is to go and say, look, we have this incredible kid and family, and we need to, you know, we need to bring them in, and while those can sometimes be compelling to those who are compassionate, if they would rather see the data. I think we have a bigger impact when we show them the actual statistics.
Right.
And CBOs can help us.
Yeah, you know, if there's one thing I'm trying to pound home in this conversation is leveraging that relationship of CBOs and allowing us to come in. And I was even thinking as we were sitting here, something I really should have put up there as kind of an easy takeaway, an easy strategy is the members of the SEED Board of Trustees have no fewer than 30 connections to independent schools just because of their kids, their friends' kids, and their business partners and whoever it is. We've had our board members talk to the board members of the schools, so it's not even, you know, there's a parity in the conversation. There's a peer conversation happening there. And as long as the CBO is doing a good job of making sure the board is well aware of the data, have them tell the story. You know, it doesn't have to be this passionate director of admissions and placement from New Jersey Seeds who's going to come in and you know, really do the rah-rah and the you have a moral imperative stomping of the fist kind of thing. It can be a very easy conversation of board member to board member or president of the CBO to the head of the school. And I know when I do these conversations a lot, everybody's like, that's all well and good if you're in New York, New Jersey, Boston, Atlanta, that you have access to these CBOs, but where am I going to go? And so I just wanted to put a map up here real quick. This is just a very small fraction of the names of 8 CBOs that are across the country and some that are national that I kind of write in the middle there. And this is aside from, you know, the great churches, you know, the churches, you know, tomorrow we're having a meeting with 20 different churches in New Jersey who are all under the same umbrella. And they're just having an annual meeting that we're going to be having a 15-minute presentation at. And I want to highlight, if you all don't know about this organization that's run out of Boston called the National Partnership for Educational Access, NPEA, you see that at the bottom of the screen there. This is a membership organization of 290 like-minded organizations across the country that have some sort of purpose in the pipeline of getting a high-need, bright high-need student an education, whether that be at the kindergarten level, private middle school, private high school, college level, but some has something to do with that pipeline. So please, I have a lot of connection with the NPEA and sit with some of their committees and boards. And please reach out to me if you're, if you're out there somewhere in a geography that you feel like you don't have access. Please let me know, and I'll put you in touch with some great people.
This next slide here, we've compiled some articles for you to read in your free time, haha. I did want to, we obviously this is a conversation that's been going on for a long time, and many of these articles actually are very recent, which I think also just speaks to the relevance of us having this conversation and continuing the conversation. And of particular interest is this 2014 Diversity Practitioner Survey, and I think you can get it without having login for NAIS. But it's really interesting that NAIS has done this survey about how we are practicing diversity in our schools. It's the first time I think they've done that. So I encourage you all to take a look at that. It's rather long, so settle in. And then the Pew Trust video, which talks about demographics, is also on here. So we'll let you, at your leisure, have a time to do that. We wanted to give some time for final thoughts and questions, because I think Corinne will probably step in. But one thing that I really want to be sure if you're the admission directors out there is the sort of mind shift, or the shift in thinking that I had to have, that when we used to want lots of inquiries and lots of applicants, and we kept trying to grow those numbers, it has become less important how many applicants, how many inquiries you have, and more the quality and how well you can know that the inquiries and the applicants are good for your school. And that's really where an organization, a CBO, can come in handy and say to you, this is a kid who's a good fit for your school, they have support at home, here's what it's going to take to make them be successful. And to partner in that way, rather than sort of casting the net as wide as you can, has become, I think, is really important for us as you go through this economic rebirth. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Corinne, is this where you step in?
It is, and we do have a couple of questions, so I wanted to address those for everyone. The first question came from Glenn. I think Robert started to answer it already about additional funding, but I didn't know if Andy and Kelly wanted to chime in. The question is really how to address issues these kinds of issues of funding at boarding schools where they have additional, you need spending money, you need travel to and from school, those types of costs that you would have as much in a day school. How are those addressed in other schools? I know Robert mentioned that he has a fund available.
Andy, you want to talk a little bit about the boarding schools that you see, how they handle it?
Yeah, there's some different ways about it, and I think it depends upon the culture of the boarding school. Some of it is a little bit behind the scenes, in that a student who comes in with some, with high need, a very private conversation is had with that family to say, this is the person on campus who you go to when you need something. It doesn't mean the answer is always going to be yes, and it may be that there's a fund that the student has access to, and then has to make decisions through the year of how to spend that fund, and it can only be used in certain areas. And I think that's a nice approach. I always cringe at the story of the kid who is standing in line at the bookstore, gets up to the desk with all of his books, and the person at the cash register says in front of the entire crowd in front of her, oh, you don't need to pay for these, you're on financial aid. Understanding the intention of it, and it was not malintent in any way, but obviously kind of outed this kid right in front of the community. And so I think there's nice ways of doing it that are very personal, and but at the same time keep a responsibility on the family of the spending of that money.
Right. And I think also adding to that, the financial aid director has to has to partner with the director of advancement and with the head to really develop these types of programs, because as Andy mentioned, there is some infrastructure, behind the scenes stuff that does need to happen in order for a program like that to be successful. And so you need allies in those areas. If you want to look to create, a fund that can be donor sponsored, that's a route that you can go. I can't forget the business manager. I don't know how I forgot that, but yes, the business manager also. Or if you want to take a portion of the financial aid budget and earmark it just for those types of allocations, there are a number of different strategies that you can use. I would try and explore all of them. And I think what we do know is that there is a need. And hopefully the data can show that there are situations where kids are not being able to take full advantage of the school experience because of funds to do this or that. And so armed with that information, you can go to your business manager, you can go to your head, you can go to your advancement director and try to develop some programs to
That's great. Thank you. We have one more question from Garth, who asked if you're need blind, and if not, what type of admission process do you use? And do you separate full pay from those requesting aid in your admission process?
I can speak to that. If you want, I can get started. Rob, you can fill in where I might miss. I think in the admission process, we are still need blind. So if we feel that there is a student for whom this is a good fit, they're mission appropriate, and we want them here, then the admission committee is likely to accept them. I think where the trickier part has become is in the allocation of financial aid dollars. There are never enough for anyone. It's hard to predict, for everyone. It's hard to predict yield, so you always send out a lot more financial aid than you have, thinking that some of it's going to come back, but what if it doesn't? And I think the term we're using more and more is need aware, so that while your admission committee is still doing the work and you're still figuring out who the best candidates are and the applicants that you want in your school, there's a little more drilling down and parsing out of that when it comes to the financial aid process. So when I go from the admission committee to the financial aid committee, it becomes, as funds start to become limited, we start to look at where the students who we want the most, who need aid, where do they fall on the list. And so, being able to look at other holes in the institution. So if we know we need first graders or we know we need 10th graders, being able to use financial aid as a tool and that way to be sure to meet the needs of other parts of the school. But there is nothing easy about it anymore. And I think a lot of us, many schools still say they're need blind, but none of us have enough money to give everybody the money that they need. So there has to be an awareness and some decisions being made at some point. And I think that's where it can feel a little lonely for financial aid directors, which is why the partnership with the business manager and the head is so important.
Of course. And then there's always that scary term, financial aid wait list. And, it is a product of being need blind when you recognize that you have candidates, but you cannot fund all of them. And, there are two schools of thought. One is that, an acceptance without funding is an empty acceptance. And I understand that. And then the other school of thought is, if the student is an acceptable student, an academic standpoint, from a fit standpoint, then have them not being able to afford to come should not have any bearing on the actual admission process.
I've done it both ways too, Rob. There have been times where there has been an acceptance and someone we've been very excited about, but we don't have the financial aid available, and instead of sending an acceptance packet, I might call the family and let them know that this is what the situation is. I think it's hard for us sitting on this side, it's as great as the SSS or TABS or any other paperwork is, it's hard to know if there's a grandparent or somebody, an angel out there that wants to help them make the financial piece work. So that's sort of the way I've been trying to look at it. And also, at some point, particularly for those of us who have lower schools, when you have the families who come in who have, they can't afford to pay any of it, and even, that even if you give them money towards tuition, the additional costs are going to be a lot. Again, I think in some ways we're helping those families by making sure they recognize that before we sign them up for a number of years at our school, and the debt they might have to incur.
Right.
Well, thank you very much. There are no additional questions other than those two, but I think that really we were able to get a really great conversation going, and I appreciate your insightful presentation today. And I want to thank our audience for tuning in and for your patience at the beginning with my little technical glitch, so I appreciate you sticking with us. And as a reminder, there's a recording of this presentation that will be available on our webinar page in the professional development section of admission.org for future reference. Thank you all for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.